Hello, it's time for Podcast 51. I'm trying to rush this one. I try to rush every podcast, but I still only manage to produce one every month at most. But I'm really trying. My point is we're nearing goals and milestones, which I really don't want to see wrapped up in this amateurish Phase 1 veneer we have right now. I must finish Phase 1 first, and I'm nearly there. This is number 51. Immediately after posting number 52 is when I'm restyling everything into Phase 2. So, it's going right into it. Like this one will release, a week after I planned it to, but, that ain't bad. That ain't bad at all compared to previous lulls on this channel. Speaking of an amateurish veneer, I'm sorry this episode has even more background air noises than all the previous ones do. It's gotten beastly hot here in Quincy in the past few weeks. My apartment only has one room, and I'm afraid I will not be turning off my air conditioning just to record for you people. It ain't worth the heat. I apologize for the hugely varying audio quality this channel has always had regardless. The truly important stuff, the fiction mostly, will be professionally recorded and edited, so, I hope you don't mind the podcast being what it is, really. We're starting, as usual, with the Keys and Kingdoms segment, and I've been going through a lot of paranoia lately since the previous podcast episode. The new Lightworks upgrade has some audio issues, so I have to be careful with my audio files, lest they erupt into horrible robotic screeching where my voice should be, and after I got my way around that, somehow the first minute of my segment on The Lion King 2 was completely erased from the video. I have no idea how that happened, only that it must have somehow actually been erased at some point during the process, because all the time codes in the video after that point came 1 minute later than they should have. I had to fix that. Weirdest thing, so I'm vigilantly keeping my eye out for that sort of thing now. So today we're starting with the usual recap, where I go through the past few episodes and log all of the Keys and Kingdoms lore I attained from them. We're starting by recapping the films of 97 and 98, which I've just done. I don't remember where I'm putting that data now. After 1994, I put everything I collected from the very beginning onto the blog, and now all that data from the blog is in the document of things I'm going to put on the TAPAS wiki. Where have I put all the data I've collected since then? Okay, here it is. It's in the same document where I kept it before. It just starts in 1995 now. When was I planning on adding the post-1995 ideas to the wiki? Whenever I get around to it, I guess. I've been struggling with the whole updating the wiki thing. Anyway, let's bring out the slide with the 1997 and 1998 movies on it and talk about the inspirations. Oh, hey, look at that. I also forgot that I've started dividing all this stuff into 9 categories. Themes, for basic genre conventions of K&K. Creatures, for exactly that. Legendary characters, for particular individuals who might exist in the RPG universe. Universe, for basic world-building details, subsets of that being magic, and magic items. And finally, ideas for storytelling, for gameplay, and for art and design. So, how far back am I going? Only 2 episodes? That makes sense. Those past 2 were a couple of very big ones. Firstly, Hercules. Naturally, this is the Disney film that most informs the mythic theme. Sword and sandal, classical mythology stuff, art style, depictions of Greece-like areas, Creatures, lots. This gave me the sudden idea that this depiction of the Olympians can represent the fairy court. As for what to do about Hades' physical appearance in this, there's probably some fiend somewhere that can be inspired by him, his facial features at least. Pegasi will be a species. That's been in order since Fantasia. There's not really anything this film's Pegasus can add. Cerberus, you got a 3-headed hellhound. Maybe it can be a species, more properly pronounced Kerberos, with one really big individual, like a greater Kerberos. I don't know, man. Imps of various colors sound good for imps. They should shapeshift, but still be identifiable when they do, never looking like totally normal and healthy animals or people, always just a little bit demonic. Or diabolic, rather. Imps are devils, not demons. Let's see, what can imps and quasits shapeshift into in current D&D? Quasits can be a bat, centipede, or toad, while imps can be a rat, raven, or spider. That's just a visual idea there. We can give them well more variety than that. Quasits, by the way, are like the demonic version of imps, because imps are devils. So I'm thinking, yeah, mephits resemble panic, while quasits resemble pain. No, I'm not entirely comfortable with that. I like the faces that quasits have in D&D. So, something to do with Pain's face, I'll figure that out. And yes, imps have the sexual dimorphism of imps in the Vivziepop universe. The film sees Zeus channeling himself into a statue of himself. Athena does that a lot in God of War. Maybe that can be a regular god thing. Nymphs! Restricting myself to the dryads, nereids, and naiads, but definitely have to keep the nymphs very mythically accurate due to the huge role they play in the family trees of the Greek gods. So the idea I had for nymphs based on the pixies in Fantasia, gonna call those sylphs instead. Satyrs. Horny, yes, but also fuckable. Women would want to cavort with them, so not Danny DeVito types. Animalistic humanoids domesticating the animals who resemble themselves. Discuss. Doesn't make much sense. Centaurs are usually not as monstrous as Nessus was depicted here, but I've been thinking since Fantasia of a centaur caste system. Maybe there are dangerous brutes like him. I think there's precedent for that. I talked about hydras a lot, nothing I didn't already have written down. Likewise, about the various Greek creatures seen during the Zero to Hero number. Let's see, is there any creature in the Keys and Kingdoms catalog which, like this film's Hydra, has 2 legs but no arms? I don't think so. Maybe I'll just invent one. Call it a creeper, after a creature of that description in the Ruby universe. Twice now I've talked about the Elder Elementals, thanks to the Zaratan that cameoed in Aladdin and the King of Thieves, and now this film's Titans. Was I going to call them Elder Elementals, or was there something else? I can't recall. It's written down somewhere. Maybe it was going to be Primordials? I don't know. And I mentioned the Greek Titans being just gods. No different from the Olympians, not Elder Elementals, just gods. I talked about the terminology a bit, how I'm categorizing the gods in Cosmos. Naturally, going with the more traditional Cyclops rather than the Titanic one depicted here. Legendary characters. Now, alignment-wise, the Deities and Demigods book does list Zeus as good and Hades as evil, and anyone versed in their mythology knows that's not entirely accurate, but I am definitely toning Zeus down into someone worthy of worship, and depicting Hades as overall selfish. Not villainous, just selfish, so it is generally not diverting from their alignment in that book. Zeus can still be chaotic good, Hades can be neutral evil. It's not super accurate to mythology, but we can make it so. I had that plan to combine the Fates with the Norns for them to be beautiful. As for the shared eye gimmick of the Grey, it's a good motif, but I don't know that I'd use it so literally, and the Grey don't seem important enough story-wise. Maybe I can make it a metaphorical deal with the Norns? Universe. Well, we know the Greek underworld is not an inherently scary place. It has good, neutral, and evil aspects. It's not hell, it is the afterlife. At least for the Greeks. And in K&K, it's one of several afterlives. Here's a fun fact. I called it Pluton, its Roman name, because, well, having a god and the place he rules both being named Hades just strikes me as pretty silly. Other universe aspects? Advertising and merchandising in universe. Something to commentate on, I suppose. Magic items, a powerful potion to save for a very special moment, which, that's most potions, that's kind of their whole deal, that you can only use them once, so you have to wait for when the time is right. But something big like this film's potion. Obviously, not one that makes an invincible creature killable, nothing is invincible in an RPG universe, but something massive like that, something that's a big fucking deal. What could that be? Storytelling ideas. I discussed bullying a dragon. I imagine that happens a lot to sorcerers. What are the traits of being a child of Zeus? Even in Keys and Kingdoms, I bet there are a lot of those. And heck, bullying in general, it's a terrible thing, worth examining. Now, I mentioned Roger Bart once played an evil pharmacist, and you know where else you'll find an evil pharmacist in Disney? Doofenshmirtz in Phineas and Ferb. Just a thought I had, evil pharmacists might be a running gag. Also, montages. Avoid creepy romantic age gaps, though for myself, I don't mind an ancient immortal being going after an adult human. That doesn't bother me personally, but I do want to keep in mind that boys can be manic pixie dream girls to jaded older women as well. women shouldn't always be the younger party. It's not inherently creepy, but it's creepy when all relationships are like that, is my problem with it. And then we have Faustian deals and characters' pasts. Deal making. I've mentioned how much Clements and Musker love having their villains who love deal making, so it's for sure something we must incorporate into K&K. Gameplay-wise, well, someone who's strong but not skilled is very dangerous, right? Someone who is very strong and then becomes skilled, even more so. And I suppose that's already accounted for in the skill system of the game we're working on. Also, I had a thought about super strength. I'm already thinking that strength gets a modifier based on size. So supernatural strength can be represented by having the strength modifier of a larger size category. I'm going to note that right now, in fact. I'm not going to wait. Like some spell enhancements will just, increase your strength score. Others will act as if your size increases, even if it doesn't, right? Finally, in the art and design category, I do so love the muses. Not the characters per se. I mean, well, they're the best, but what I'm thinking is the way they're all designed, all their different hair, bodies, and outfits, and the arts they represent. Let me check something. So the 5 muses featured in the film are Calliope, the muse of epic poetry, Talia, the muse of comedy and pastoral stories, Clio, the muse of history, Terpsichore, the muse of dance, and Melpomene, the muse of tragedy. There are 9 muses in most versions of the myths, the other 4 being Euterpe for music, Erato for love poetry and songs, Polyhymnia for religious hymns, and Urania for astronomy. Neat! Not sure if the muses as characters ought to exist in K&K, but that's a decent list of art forms to keep in mind for worlds and stories. Pooh's Grand Adventure. We're moving on to the next film, to Pooh's Grand Adventure. Themes-wise, I'm thinking a musical adventure in what's normally a very slice-of-life story. I do like the thought. Creatures. I discussed again how, while most of the Pooh cast are living plushies, a handful are awakened animals. And I had the thought that, there's good reason for both to exist together. A similar rich people gimmick, hiring a powerful magic user to bring a toy to life, or to give an animal the power of speech. Both ways to, treat a sapient being as a toy, because you're rich. Also, the addition of Jagulars is a good inspiration for, actually dangerous plushie constructs, or possibly taxidermied guardians, to join the ranks of the elephant and dire weasel versions. As for the Skullosaurus, I'm not going to use that name, but I'm definitely picturing some deadly skeletal saurian thing that's worth thinking about. Universe-wise, a skull-shaped location with its crystalline caverns and many pathways, that's pretty sweet. The Upside-Down Rock, and basically everything on the map, from escalating woodses to the Butterfly Meadow and nice peaceful spot. As for the map itself, the map to Skull, that's very iconic to many childhoods. Maybe it's a magical artifact of sorts, or just worthy of replication. I don't know. Most of this film's ideas gave us storytelling ideas. The end of a golden summer, as I alluded earlier, the abandonment of a plushie construct, the theme of, you're better than you think you are. You can handle more on your own than you might think. Particularly trusting one's intuition. Then we ought to balance that out with some encouragement to trust experts, Realistic weather, seasons, darkness, and parables. Stories with adventurers who represent virtues. Beauty and the Beast, the Enchanted Christmas. Well, I thought back on the demonic furniture deal and realized that while the living fire pokers and woodcutting axes didn't work in the film, those things being alive and floating around trying to attack you would actually be pretty scary if you just removed the faces and voices. And I had the thought, under what situation other than a fairy tale would you want to turn people into animate household objects? What would a spellcaster gain from that? I'm considering the Enchantress as a legendary character. I know the character is a fairy for sure, but perhaps a very powerful and known individual. Storytelling, well, there was my thought that bumbling idiot villains should have scary and ruthlessly efficient henchmen, not the other way around. The storybook imagery of Belle's, storybook was awesome. Maybe more of an art and design note, actually. Did I miscategorize that one? Gift giving, that's a good story beat. Something I personally struggle with in my life. Worth writing stories about, to be sure. Fanaticism, he who redoubles his efforts while forgetting his objectives. Great villain. And basically, things that are mind-bendingly large, like Forte's face in this film. Gameplay, item-wise, there's big-ass pipe organs, not living ones, but damn are they atmospheric. Sonic attacks, more of those. They are indeed quite debilitating, I would imagine. And ontological inertia. What spells end when the caster dies? What spells end when the victim dies? Another question to ask right now, I should think. Put that on the old wiki right this very minute. Mulan. Nice. Well, this is a war story. That's a good genre note. An adventure war story. That's very cool. Creatures. There's lucky crickets. Maybe crickets aren't actually lucky, but maybe crickets, whether normal or giant, are kept for luck purposes. And maybe pseudo-dragons such as Mushu are connected to the celestial dragons. See, the idea I had for Eastern dragons is that they're celestial, and physically very different from the more Western-style chromatic and metallic dragons of D&D. The idea for celestial dragons is that, like chromatics and metallics, there are 5 different kinds, 4 of which are named in the same fashion as the chromatics, but again, different. They correspond to the 4 elements. Yellow dragons are related to earth, mostly sand. Aqua dragons are water. They spit water, maybe it's boiling sometimes. Orange dragons are fire, and finally there are mauve dragons for air. I like mauve. I think that's a Myth Adventures reference. I think in the very first Myth Adventures book there's a group of dragons, and he comments, wow, one of them is even mauve. And then the 5th kind is the rainbow dragon, which represents pure energy. Celestial dragons will also, I'm sure, take some cues from whatever Raya and the Last Dragon did with Eastern dragons. I should ought to watch that film and find out, probably soon, before we get to it in the collection, just to gather some ideas on Gyanshi. Universe, we're mostly thinking about Gyanshi here. Like, maybe they're not crazy about the Norse gods, despite being in their region. Maybe they prefer their ancestors, Confucianism and stuff. I did think before getting to this movie that Shangri-La is a celestial realm, reachable via Gyanshi, home to Wukong the Monkey King, very famous figure in Chinese legend. Maybe Gyanshi has a big-ass border wall like the Great Wall of China. I did figure it a fairly xenophobic place. Maybe it's like the wall from Game of Thrones. Now that's a big-ass wall. Women in the military, because why the fuck shouldn't they be? I try not to make sexism a factor in most Keys and Kingdoms stories, or, other fantasy stories I write. I try not to make sexism a factor, but surely the world of Cosmos doesn't have perfect gender equality everywhere you go, yeah? Granted, I could make that case if I wanted, but there should be places in the world that ain't all that great, and individuals who do have it in their head that women are inferior somehow. That whole what happens if I bear a daughter question. Matchmaking, arranged marriages in both rich and poor settings. T, big thing in the economy, yeah? Honor. How to play with the notion that honor is really more like faith, that it's about keeping up with the Joneses, not honor per se. So the Huns, according to Shirin J. Zhao, are Central Asians, so maybe they'd be more involved with Strumvik, the nation based on Russia, which, if I remember my own math correctly, does border Gyanshi. Is it the only country that borders Gyanshi? Had to stop and check. That was very wrong. No, most countries in the north border Gyanshi. But yeah, maybe their wall is mostly to keep the Russians out, right? Then there's Buddhist-style monks. I don't think I'll have the Buddha as a character in K&K. I think that would be more acceptable than including Jesus or even the Hindu gods, as Buddhists don't really worship the Buddha as a god. I just doubt I have the tact to respectively represent Buddha as a character, whereas the Hindu gods are more touchable, more presentable as characters, even if people do still follow them today, and, I don't care who I offend with depictions of Jesus, so no actual Buddhism, just people who follow a similar path in this fantasy world. And finally, that one line from the song that made me wonder if maybe this culture has a belief that a soldier has to be handsome. Magic. Not much magic in this film, save ancestral spirits actually appearing. Maybe family guardians too. The Fa family had a few other animal totems, apart from Mushu and the stone dragon. I should look into what those were. I see a monkey, a bull, a dog, a bird of some sort, and a rabbit. I think we're all the Fa family guardians. I didn't write that down. Let me note that. Okay. And Shan Yu's appearance, his purplish skin, fangs, claws, and those insane eyeballs of his might be a sign of dabbling in dark magic. Storytelling-wise, you got characters who speak entirely in aphorisms. I know a particular druid in D&D who's known for that, and mysterious Chinese characters do it all the time. Late bloomers? Maybe. Either way, you should be supportive of who someone is now. Spoiled rich kids who skip school in these medieval societies, based purely on my headcanon about Ling there. Do one's best to get ethnically accurate voice actors, but don't worry about getting it perfect. Drill sergeant routines. I'd fucking die on the spot if I had to experience a drill sergeant, but watching it is fun, kinda. One I actually thought of, actual plots about gaining skills, not merely montages. The notion that you have to be the best of the best to get an amount of respect equal to a white guy who is merely mediocre, let's think about that. Plot armor, had some thoughts about it. Let's try to avoid seeing it happen, but, and disqueezes. Gameplay, how about some lingering injuries? There's an optional rule in D&D about that, but I find it a bit over the top. I think we can go with some nuance there. Old veteran characters. The avalanche maneuver, worth trying, I think. War fans, that is to say metal fans that don't blow air, that you actually, I don't know how you hurt someone with a war fan, maybe they're purely defensive. Mulan did quite famously disarm Shan Yu with it. And the dark side of fireworks, as Kung Fu Panda 2 says, they do blow you the fuck up. Art and design, an emperor kind of outfit. It's yellow. The outfits in this movie in general, really, all of them, all the costuming and the different roles they represent. Makeup, too, the long and ritualistic makeover. The Chinese coins, which the weights resemble, right? I figure every nation in K&K uses gold and silver and copper coinage, just in various different designs. The dancing dragon thingy, the dragon they have in Chinese New Year parades. Those things are cool. And finally, character animation teams as a TAPAS standard. God no, people would get bored to death if they had to draw just one character over and over. Pocahontas 2. Central premise-wise, it's like first contact between Nixie and Shayfell, the countries respectively representing pre-colonial North America and all the British Isles. Coincidentally, those countries are actually pretty nearby each other, not a very long trip at all. And in Shayfell, there's fog. Yeah, we all know British weather, right? No daytime, only fog. Storytelling, there's the prospect of dealing with volatile kings, They're not reasonable people, but they're in charge and you have to deal with them their way. There's very long travel times. This has been a big deal for much of human history and continues to be a factor in stories like Game of Thrones. The handling of language barriers. Here's one thing I didn't mention while reviewing the film. The way Udo Matamakin runs everywhere. He doesn't ride in a carriage, he just runs alongside it. Super stupid when he does it because he's just a big human, not some supernatural creature, but I've seen elves and orcs and such creatures engage in that in other stories, going on foot while their companions have to ride. And hey, it certainly speaks to physical prowess, badassery, experiencing other cultures, and dressing like them. We gotta make that cool again, yo. It's not always appropriation. Sometimes it's a sincere and flattering attempt to connect with someone. Dressing as the civilization you're visiting and trying to understand. It's a cool thing if you have guidance and actually use the symbolism right. Prison Break! That's a fun plot, and this one was especially good. A low-take break into the Tower of London or wherever. And, ending up with the love interest you didn't expect. I liked that in the film. Gameplay! Shall there be rules about the seasons and weather? I should think so. What about growing crops? Yeah, it sounds like basically writing an in-universe farmer's almanac. Shit, that sounds like a novelty some people would actually be into. And finally, art and design. Change in seasons and costumes accordingly. I faced a challenge of doing that in the choices, with the later seasons having a cold north setting or a desert setting, both of which are difficult to work with due to the fact that a number of the cast members always dress super sexily, but they can't do that in the winter or the desert. And considering they seldom wear any armor, practicality in wardrobe isn't a big priority, but I don't want to break suspension of disbelief. Also, camouflage paint. Yay! The Lion King 2. So, in the past, not sure if I've mentioned this before, I figured out what to do with the wildlife theme. That animals have no language. No talking in wildlife stories set in normal campaign settings. As for how to handle the Lion King World and Kingdom butts, then, I'll just have someone explain out of character how things normally work in K&K, and how KB normally abides by K&K rules, but we're gonna let the lions talk because it's just easier to tell the story that way. And hey, anyone's free to break that rule in a wildlife-themed game. Sometimes you are going to want to tell a Watership Down type of story with verbal communication in it after all. Creatures, no new notes, just thought I'd mention my assumption for alligators and crocodiles, is that alligators are medium-sized and crocodiles are large-sized. Now, in real life, alligators do get to be nearly as big as crocodiles. It's just, in America, you're more likely to encounter an alligator that's human-sized or smaller, so I associate crocodiles with being bigger. I also want to mention something I saw online recently about how no one blames the wildebeests for Mufasa's death. They're citizens of the Pride Lands. Can they not control themselves while stampeding at all? Incest, universe. How does the K&K universe deal with incest? I mock Lion King for shying away from it. We know the gods have always dabbled in it, going with the Percy Jackson explanation that gods simply do not have genetics. But how do people feel about mortals doing it? I guess that varies. Royalty might prefer it. Commoners less so, but on the other hand, I'm suddenly thinking of the purebloods from Harry Potter who commit incest to make sure their family remains all wizard, feeling like royalty for it no matter how impoverished they've become. Also wondering about this film's odd motif of the youngest son having special privileges. Storytelling? Mirroring a previous installment without repeating it. This film does that very nicely with its songs. I liked that. Another good example I can think of is Better Yet, the first big TAPAS project to be released. Upcoming as of right now. Very closely upcoming, I'd say. It has 2 acts like most plays, and each act has 5 scenes, and each scene in Act 2 mirrors the scenario of the corresponding scene in Act 1. It's very neatly done. Being who you are, or a link in the chain. Be who everyone expects of you, or not. Conditioning from childhood to be a weapon of revenge. Like the Ninja Turtles. A lifetime of growing stronger with no friends or fun, purely to kill your caretaker's greatest enemy and continue the endless cycle of bloodshed. Cowabunga. I'm talking about the original comic book version of the Ninja Turtles, that is, which were just, a dark and gritty... Which were, the original Ninja Turtles, they were very dark and gritty. The comedy was just from the fact that they're turtles and that they were making fun of Daredevil. Otherwise, it was very serious. But yeah, all future versions of the Ninja Turtles were actually comical and less nihilistic, I guess. Okay. Setting your enemy's territory ablaze and maybe doing something a bit more permanent, salt in the earth, the metaphor about fire was damn good, because strong stuff does grow in the wake of a fire. Hence why I thought of a more permanent, nastier solution. That's why I mentioned salting the earth. From there, being a fake defector, and being a fake defector who becomes a real defector. And a soulful angry mob song. Not unlike the soulful drill sergeant song from Mulan. It adds 2 songs in '98 that sound a lot less angry than you'd expect. Now, finally, the merging of tribes. I like how distinctly evil and ragged the Outlanders look, so when the 2 prides merge, it really stands out that this is a merging of 2 groups. You can easily tell who came from which group. I like that. Gameplay. Is there a divine right of kings? I shouldn't think so. I want that to be bullshit even in worlds with gods. But maybe examine why a Fisher King is such. Maybe they fused themselves to the land with magic somehow. And art and design. I like termite mounds. Maybe someone layering in them. That'd be pretty sweet. And main characters in wildlife stories having distinctive appearances in subtle ways. More subtle than Happy Feet, at least, which gave its main character the plumage of a baby penguin in his adulthood because all the other very real-looking penguins in the film just looked too similar to each other. That could have been done a lot better. And finally, for this recap, we have A Bug's Life. Mouse World stuff. As I've mentioned, there are no people in the K&K universe who are as small as mice, so certainly not any who are as small as ants. As far as I can recall, the smallest sapient beings in that universe, as far as I can remember right now, are the pixies, who average about 9 inches tall, so nobody who'd be scared of a finch. Maybe if you're playing as an actual bug in the wildlife theme, I don't know, but that would be inadvisable if you wanted to last very long. Creatures. Oh, well, it did give us some thoughts about circes rather than regular bugs. I'm thinking the varying abilities of the species. Most easily, some insects can fly and some can't, so that would be true among circes. Other powers include stingers, powerful mandibles, camouflage, silk. Varying diets is worth thinking about. Appearance-wise, I'm thinking circes have 3-fingered hands, and I've always known they have 4 arms. They are not eusocial, but their sensory organs might be incorporated into their culture. Anyway, circes always resemble some kind of insect. So let's go down all the insects that appear in this film. When compiling my fantasy bestiary long ago, I created 5 categories for insects. The first was common insects, referring to beetles, butterflies, and moths. I'm thinking now that's a bit absurd. We should split that category into 2. One for beetles, one for butterflies and moths. We'll call it the butterfly category. I'm loath to prioritize one over the other, but butterflies are just more popular, obviously, and calling them lepidopterans is too much of a mouthful. For beetles, this film gives us a big blue rhino beetle, a ladybug, and some fireflies. For butterflies, it gives us Gypsy for a moth and Heimlich for a butterfly. And, the film never claimed biological accuracy. Gypsy does have some butterfly traits, but I do appreciate their commitment to making her a moth instead. The next category was flies. Pretty broad category, there's lots of flies. And I'm including the likes of dragonflies, mosquitoes, anything that's basically a fly. This film has the many houseflies in the circus audience, a big old horsefly they bring in as backup to torment Francis later, and mosquitoes in various service jobs throughout. Next category was social insects. Hymenoptera to be technical. This taxonomic order includes ants, bees, and wasps. This film just has ants. No bees or wasps in this film, as far as I can tell. And here's where it got a little bit complicated. Beetles, butterflies, flies, and social insects make up a vast amount of species on this planet. But there's a shitload of other kinds of insects out there, and for now, I think I'm good with just 2 additional categories. Garden insects, and a category I called pestilential insects for many years, never quite happy with it. Had the idea just yesterday to call them urban insects instead. Garden insects are the likes of grasshoppers and crickets, stick insects, mantises. Urban insects include fleas, cockroaches, termites, and earwigs. Hopefully any insect can fit into one of those 6 categories. It'll require some taxonomy studies. One notable thing I'd say is that insects of the first 4 categories all have a larval stage. They're born as maggots or caterpillars or grubs. So any kind of bug that does that, we're going to want to fit into one of those 4 categories, while the last 2 are just born as tiny bugs. And so we figure out if they're garden or urban based on, their taxonomic connection to established species. In A Bug's Life, the only urban insect encountered was a flea, and garden insects included the grasshoppers naturally, a prominent stick insect and mantis, and some background crickets. Oh, and an aphid. I never mentioned Aphie in my review, but yes, the queen carries around a little aphid, Aphie, who acts like a dog. Unlike Thumper, it's justified that an aphid acts like a dog because ants do farm aphids in real life, but I don't think stats for aphids are necessary. He can probably just be represented by some sort of big, loyal cricket companion or something. Non-insects appearing in this film, and thus creatures for which circes cannot resemble, well, we have another 4 categories. Arachnids, probably can subdivide that into spiders and scorpions. There's a prominent widow spider in the cast, that other spider who's in the circus band, and that memorable occasion when a big old harvestman passes over Flick's head when he first enters the city. Most people call them Daddy Longlegs. I prefer harvestman, because Daddy Longlegs is a fucking stupid name for an animal. Then there's centipedes and millipedes. The subphylum is properly called myriapods, but I think making it the centipede category is informative enough. In addition to the giant millipedes who pull P.T.'s wagon, a few more sapient centipedes are seen throughout the film. And for the crustacean category, we have pillbugs. And, that was it for arthropods. Insects, arachnids, centipedes, and crustaceans. That should just about cover it. As for other bugs, there are gastropods. Some snails and slugs inhabit the background in the city. And is there any other category of animal that some consider bugs? Worms, I guess. I don't think there were any worms in this film. The thought that in any species that can fly, the children probably can't. An exception would be reptilian creatures, I should think. I think leading theories right now are that pterosaurs could fly from birth. No one can know for sure, of course. I'm surprised at how much we do state confidently about the creatures that left those mangled bones behind. Just how many species of Mesozoic wildlife we do know about is pretty amazing. And finally, I just want to mention, the reason I was so attached to the adorable goldfinch that menaces our heroes, well, the day Zia was born, I bought an Audubon bird from the hospital gift shop, an American goldfinch, as a present. Cute little stuffed bird, and when you squeeze it, it makes a bird call, so goldfinches bring back memories for me, though I don't know if the bird in this film was a goldfinch like people say. Goldfinches are, gold in color, but it was some kind of finch for sure. Universe! Think of climates other than the standard 4-season system we know in temperate zones. Sometimes it's just dry and rainy, it's more equatorial. The presence of a queen on a tiny island makes me think maybe Mishkas and Circes govern themselves, within the limits of the cities they inhabit. Maybe they got little mini monarchies. And I'm intrigued by that ritualistic offering stone they offer the grasshoppers, despite the aesthetic otherwise being one of a biker gang with a protection racket. I want to think about that. Had some ideas for magic items here. I described Flick's grain harvesting machine as basically a mini mech suit, something that reminded me of the psychically powered mining mech suits the Duergar use in D&D. There's a thought. Also a big mecha decoy of a giant predator, because if you think about it, that bird they made is basically Mecha Godzilla, yeah? Also flamethrowers. Flamethrowers do exist, of course, but they're not as badass of a weapon as they're often depicted in movies, but if they were magical, there you go. Storytelling ideas, lots. Starts with the basic premise. Protection racket type stuff, making me think of other forms of organized crime, triads, mafia, and of course fantasy worlds usually call them thieves' guilds. And they can live in a snazzy resort far from the territories they basically govern, and they can be battled by a 7 samurai sort of plot. We'll see. Motley crews to give organizations flavor and color. Referring to the 4 personalities on the Ant Island Council, I like how Pixar always used to do that. Using an insane specimen of one's own species as an attack dog. It's such a sadistic thing to do if you apply that logic to it. It's even scarier, and I love it. The notion that one man can make a difference, one individual standing up, that's also mentioned in Mulan. From Flick's initial appearance in the city, I'm thinking characters who are very obvious tourists. Lots of comedy and story potential there, and bad guy bars. The various types of theater kids, not only in the second grade play, but also the circus crew, their various acts and strengths. Hopper being a bad boss, his murderous methods of motivational speaking. Oppressors know they're outnumbered, yeah, they know. And the rest of Hopper's scheme of terror is pretty sweet. Taking all the food, killing of the queen when it's over, it's pretty intense. And the foggy-ass atmosphere near the end there was so awesome. A community with a strong tradition of, well, tradition. Complete rejection of the new. And finally, fake-ass foreign stuff. The Chinese Cabinet of Metamorphosis is an excellent example, and there are so many in our world. Things that are passed off as being ancient and foreign, usually claimed to be Chinese or Indian, due to those being the farthest away places people in Europe and the Middle East could think of back in the day. Which are very much not that. Like fortune cookies, or yoga, or the German board game, which to this day is most commonly known as Chinese checkers. I'm curious what kind of deceptions like that might have gone on in the K&K world. Gameplay. I'm wondering how the game rules might handle a flash flood and other weather phenomena. Those are scary. Worth mentioning in story section, I think. Art and design. Well, among this movie's ants, the men are blue and the women are purple. I think that's also true of Andalites from Animorphs, at least it is in illustrations. I don't think it's ever said in the text. An interesting marker that doesn't bear too many gender stereotypes with it. Throughout the film, the various stick, stone, and leaf equipment and clothing, the snail shell horns, those luminous mushrooms of all sizes, some being torches, some being the actual illuminated floor of a room. That's a gameplay feature too, rules about luminous mushrooms like that. I also like the various foods seen throughout the film, just simple kernels of grain and tiny berries. Scavenged human stuff, naturally, and I particularly like the use of dew in the film. That was neat, how they really noted the physics of that. Though again, no one in the K&K universe is that small. And finally, again, the flight and pose configurations in the film, which so obsessed me as a kid. It makes me think of party formations in various stories about adventurers. Oh, nice. That's a good idea. Whew, okay. With that out of the way, let's start looking at 1999, the final year of the Disney Renaissance era. The final year of Disney content I'll be looking at for Season 1 of the podcast. After Season 1, the Keys and Kingdom segment gets its own podcast, and the podcast regains some semblance of identity, I guess. The first film of 1999 is in fact the last film of the Disney Renaissance, that being Tarzan, registered trademark. I'm sorry. I made myself laugh there, forgive me. Tarzan is in the public domain, but it's also a registered trademark of the Edgar Rice Burroughs estate. I don't really know how that works. I only know that the Burroughs estate can prevent Disney from doing stuff if they so choose. So even though Disney's version of Tarzan has a TV show and a sequel, its appearances and crossover events are rather limited. It's not something Disney can parade around any old time they want. Most notably, a Tarzan world appeared in the first Kingdom Hearts game but was never seen again. So, that's enough background information, I guess. Only 1 minute in. I guess of all the animated canon films of the Renaissance, this is the one I'm least familiar with. I mean, I've seen it, just not a whole bunch of times, I guess. Let's jump on in. We open on a flaming shipwreck, with the only survivors escaping in a lifeboat. A married couple and their baby, who, as we all know, are the king and queen of Arendelle. Except, they're not. Screw stupid theories like that. Theorize about stuff that might actually happen in the next installment, jerkwads. Enough with the crossover theories. I hate those. Anyway, wowza, the music starts instantly, not counting the logos in the title. We are 25 seconds into this film when the singing starts. That shouldn't be alarming. Most musicals open with singing before they're speaking, but I don't know. This felt a bit sudden. There wasn't much of an overture or anything. Unlike the rest of the Renaissance films, Tarzan isn't really a musical. The characters do sing, but very little, far less than they did in any previous animated canon film. Instead, the soundtrack is singer-songwritered by Phil Collins. The songs get whole sequences devoted to them, but they're mostly performed by Collins himself as a kind of singing narrator. I think it works to the film's benefit. The lyrics to the film's songs kind of drive me crazy. They're impossibly generic when they're not stupidly tautological, but the sound of the songs, it's extremely emotionally powerful, so it gets a pass. I was talking about this with Mason not long ago. What do I mean by tautological? Well, look at the first words we hear in the film. Put your faith in what you most believe in. That's what faith is. He just told us to have faith in our faith. Worse, that's not the only song Phil Collins has written that uses that phrase, put your faith in what you most believe in. Still, as I said, soulful. This film did win the Academy Award for Best Original Song in '99. Not this song, but the next one. One of its opponents in that category was the South Park movie. Naturally, a South Park episode about how much Phil Collins sucks soon followed. I haven't seen it, but, it's definitely something Trey Parker would do. It seems in character. Anyway, these elegant and handsome, I'm assuming British people, they survive the shipwreck along with their teeny tiny baby. The flaming ship sinks behind them and they make their way to the African jungle coast visible on the horizon. They make the most of it. They make themselves a big-ass treehouse and have a good time doing it. As long as they have each other and have no hope of rescue, they make it work. I was recently musing about all the countries in the world of Keys and Kingdoms. There's 18 of them, each based on a region or regions of the real world. I looked through my collection, noted the setting of every film on the list, and compiled them, at least the animated canon films, as places to look for visual inspiration for certain K&K countries, for scenery, architecture, and costuming. Naturally, I ended up with a massive list of films to inspire the setting based on the UK. Some places are more sparse, but at least have something. For Germany, I have both Snow White and Tangled. For Russia, there's no Disney feature set there, but the Swan Princess and Anastasia both are, so at least there's some major animated production design to draw from. For Italy, there's pretty much just Pinocchio. Films about colonizer types, such as Pocahontas, Tarzan, and another non-Disney example, The Road to El Dorado, can provide motifs for two locations, England and North America, England and Africa, Spain and South America. Yeah. Elsewhere within that jungle, we come upon a colony of gorillas. Let's see. I know a bit of trivia about canonical Tarzan lore. the 24-book novel series by Edgar Rice Burroughs, which ran from 1912 to 1966, the first 10 of which are in the public domain, and the last 2 of which were published over a decade after Burroughs' 1950 death. I'm not going to do any research or anything beyond what I just did to describe the book series itself. I'm just going to bring up things I already know about the canonical Tarzan and other past depictions. One thing being, in the books, the apes who raised Tarzan were called the Mangani, and they were hominid species, less advanced than humans, but more so than any other real great ape. They are sort of like jungle Sasquatches, or like a surviving offshoot of Australopithecus. The Disney film simplifies it significantly, just makes them gorillas. Can't say I disagree with that decision. So anyway, gorillas. The clan leader is Kerchak, played by Lance Henriksen, and his mate is Kala, played by Glenn Close. And they have a baby too. Both families are shaken up by an attack by Sabor, a leopard of apparently legendary reputation considering the gorillas know her by name. When would she have told them her name, you know? Sabor makes her mark on the story, first when Kerchak and Kala's baby wanders too far one night. We see nothing, only Kala's anguish. Sometime later, Kala hears wailing in the distance, and finds the treehouse structure made by the humans. It's like nothing she's ever seen before, but she recognizes the blood-stained paw prints as Sabor's, the leopard having murdered these strange, ape-like creatures now dead in the corner. Kala finds the infant human, the source of the cries she heard, and though the creature is alien to her, she comforts it and brings it home. I've talked a lot in the past about humans raised by animals and how that works in Keys and Kingdoms. The idea at the time was that you can only talk to animals if they raised you, but after trying to logic out how animal language works, I've decided that animals simply have no grasp of language, that even if you were raised by animals, you can't speak to them without the use of magic. I can still imagine that being a super emotional moment, you know, like, even better, you know, just imagine having access to magic that allows you to have one conversation with a beloved pet, right? For most adventurers, I figure they don't have that kind of magic until a little while into their journey, so it's a pretty nice thought. After having the terrifying realization that Sabor is still in the room, Kala fights her off with the baby in hand in an exceptionally well-choreographed fight scene, though one with more comical levity than I'd have liked. She takes the baby back to the gorilla colony. I love noticing details I've only ever noticed before while playing this world in Kingdom Hearts. Say what you will about the Disney worlds and characters in that series being filler, the attention to detail in the character designs and especially scenery is extraordinary. They go way harder and more accurate than most Disney-made material does. Kala tells the colony that she's going to raise this strange baby creature, but Kerchak is uneasy about it. He will never be my son. Kala names the baby Tarzan, and in one of the rare moments of characters singing, starts up a little lullaby that leads us into You'll Be in My Heart. I'm loving how much CGI is incorporated into the environments. I wish more films like that got made, that had integrated the two types of animation together before CGI took over completely. It's really nice. The small handful of traditionally animated films DreamWorks made handled that really well. Some years later, Tarzan is a very tiny child voiced by Alex Linz. He's trying to find himself, stay on Kerchak's good side. His friend Turk, played by Rosie O'Donnell, tries to keep him safe, but also to keep herself in good standing with her peer group, so doesn't spend much time with him. Rosie O'Donnell is a controversial performer. I don't know why. I don't know very much about her. There's this, which she's excellent in. She played Betty in the Flintstones movie, which, as far as I can tell, she was criticized for not having the looks to capture Betty's long history as a cartoon sex icon, but had her mannerisms and comedy down perfectly. And she was in the Sesame Street special Elmo Palooza, and she was awesome in that, so I don't know, maybe she's best known for some far less savory media, maybe she's just opinionated and people find her obnoxious in her personal life, I don't know, I like what she did in everything I've ever seen her in. Tarzan dearly wants to hang out with Turk's friends, and they say that to be cool enough to do that, he has to pluck a hair from an elephant. Why the elephants in this film's universe are bright red, I couldn't tell you, but anyway, Tarzan heads into the river where the elephants are to grab one. A neurotic hypochondriac baby elephant called Tantor tries to warn his herd of bacteria and piranhas. How a wild baby elephant in the 1910s knows that bacteria and piranhas exist, the former being microorganisms and the other being, as another elephant lampshades, native to South America. How do elephants know that? It's funny as hell, but you have to wonder. And let's see, who is that actress playing Tantor's mother? She also plays the waitress in The Emperor's New Groove. She sounds a lot like Estelle Harris, but no, that's not her. Apparently it's Patty Deutsch. Why do I know that name? Ah, that's it. I remember her name because she played one of the aliens in The Land Before Time 7. That's right, The Land Before Time only got 7 films in before introducing aliens to its dinosaur series. 2 dinosaurs seen throughout that film, the other played by Charles Kimbrough, have a strange breadth of scientific understanding of the nature of the universe, and encourage Littlefoot to think critically and scientifically as well. And at the end of the film, Littlefoot watches them vanish in a beam of light, mystifying him, but revealing to the audience that they have this knowledge and wisdom because they're fucking aliens. I think it was done exceptionally well, but some fans, people who are still fans of The Land Before Time 7 movies in, found that a difficult moment to swallow. Whether you like that moment or not, I think, never referencing aliens again was probably the right call, though. Anyway, Tarzan, long story short, after causing much chaos among the elephants, whew, damn, I forgot he even got them stampeding through the gorilla nesting grounds, Tarzan brings the elephant heir back to Turk. Tarzan takes the fall for causing the stampede and putting lives at risk, confessing just enough to Kerchak to prevent Turk being blamed too. Turk sticks close to Tarzan's side from here on out. That night, Tarzan rages at being different from the gorillas and not fitting in, but Kala comforts him, and in a very comforting talking to a child way, assures him that, whatever he is, he's a living being and does deserve to fit in. Tarzan swears to prove himself to Kerchak by being the best gorilla in the colony. Now comes my favorite song from the film, Son of Man, a big montage of Tarzan pushing himself to be awesome. Soon learning that sure, he doesn't have the physical prowess of a gorilla, but he's clever. He can outwit predators, he can fashion weapons and tools that better the colony, he can use his environment to his advantage. And soon we transition into him being an adult, played by Tony Goldwyn, now with the strength and dexterity to back up his cleverness. The big selling point of this film is that in addition to the whole vine-swinging thing that cinematic Tarzans are known for, Tarzan also navigates the jungle canopy using sick surfing and skateboarding techniques. Well, Disney noticed what was cool in the 90s while it was still the 90s? Shock! That's so unlike them. Bunch of old-fashioned disco dance, the Disney company. Have been from day one. Pioneers in the animation medium, yes. Trendsetters, not so much. Sure, they invented Broadway-style animated musicals, but remember, the actual big-ass Broadway musicals blew up in the 80s, Let's talk about Tarzan's character design, because it's cool as shit. Most of this was true of his child self, not all of it, but some, but I really want to focus on the adult Tarzan we're getting right now. Firstly, he wears a loincloth. You might wonder why. I don't. You have any idea how much a human penis gets in the way when you're walking around naked? Most animals keep their penis in a sheath so it doesn't get damaged. Humans have theirs hanging out in the open. Have to make their own sheaths. So yes, it makes sense that feral human males in the movies fashion themselves loincloths. It's not just modesty so they can be on screen. It's quite practical in my opinion. Most cinematic Tarzans before this film wore togas. Just a little something around the loins makes far more sense. Further design details, he has white guy dreadlocks, makes sense, no shampoo in the rainforest. Obviously looks way better in 2D animation than it would in reality. He doesn't have any facial or body hair, some guys just can't grow any. He has this very narrow face. I think I read once that it's influenced by Tony Hawk's face, given the aforementioned skateboarding angle. He has striking green eyes and a delightful suntan. I don't know, he's just really well designed, but the main reason I brought that up was to discuss 2 extremely brilliant aspects. One is that he's the first and only Disney animated character to be designed with pinpoint accuracy in his musculature. He has every muscle that a real man would. Makes sense. He doesn't wear much and he's extremely physical, so it's quite sensible that they'd work to make sure he looks real. The other is the fact that he walks on all 4s like an ape. His legs super bent while he knuckle walks on his hands. In reality, this would damage the shit out of his spine, but it looks so fucking cool. And I just realized his habit of ambushing his mother and making incredibly loud noises comes back in the climax. I never put that together before. That's pretty awesome. So, as an adult, Tarzan is a more confident guy. Turk is fully accepting of him, and he hangs out with her and Tantor, now played by Wayne Knight, even if most of the other gorillas merely tolerate him, and Kerchak can't really be said to do even that. We only have enough time to establish such things when Sabor shows up. Surely a very elderly Sabor by now. How long do leopards live? Like 17 years? Yeah, she should be dead as all hell. Tarzan's at least that old, and Sabor was an adult when he was a baby. How long do gorillas live? 40 years. Hey, that's not bad at all. You got very few animals out there who live as long as a human. Parrots and elephants about equal humans. Famously, there's the giant tortoise, which lives well over a century. More obscure candidates that beat the tortoise are the bowhead whale and the Greenland shark, both of which have been observed to be somewhere in the range of 300 years old. But that's about it for cool animals that live a long time. Beyond that, there's some sea urchins, jellyfish, clams. Anyway, Sabor. When she makes her presence known, Kerchak steps in to fight her. He holds his own for a while. When Kerchak loses the advantage for just a second, Tarzan steps in with his spear, outmaneuvering her, wounding her, and getting a sick wound across his pec in return, which sadly does not linger. And losing his spearhead before finding it again, Sabor tackles Tarzan and they both go still. But Tarzan emerges and lifts the vile leopardess's body into the air and gives a mighty, hollering ululation, something he'd been quietly practicing since his youth. The Tarzan yell originates from the film version of Tarzan portrayed by Johnny Weissmuller in the 30s and 40s. He wasn't the first cinematic Tarzan, but he was an iconic one due to already having a world-renowned career as an Olympic swimmer, having the body of an Olympic swimmer, and, naturally, helping invent the yell. Not only the yell, but also the notion that Tarzan has a poor grasp of English. Edgar Rice Burroughs hated the non-articulate version of Tarzan. In the books, Tarzan taught himself to speak English from the books his parents left behind. Hey Edgar, that's fucking stupid. Give the writer of Johnny's version a raise for making the character make some sense. The yell is trademarked by Edgar Rice Burroughs Incorporated, and, it's very hard to replicate. Most parodies and other adaptations just use the exact same sound clip from Weissmuller's films. For Disney's version, they wanted to make their own update of it. Tarzan's voice actor Tony Goldwyn was unable to produce a satisfactory version, so instead, the Tarzan yell in this film is performed by Brian Blessed, a highly decorated English actor of screen and stage known for, his intensely loud bellowing. He was on hand playing this film's villain, whom we'll talk about in a moment, so it only makes sense that he's the creator of this new Tarzan yell. I don't know if I could pull that off better if I tried to do it louder, but, I didn't want to blow out my mic or nothing. The gorillas crowd around Tarzan excitedly, but Kerchak is needlessly bitter, even when Tarzan spots him and offers him Sabor's mangled corpse. Maybe they would have had time if not for the sound of a gunshot, something foreign and very loud to all of them. While the gorillas find some shelter, Tarzan investigates, and for the first time, he sees some fellow humans. The path is being cut by John Clayton, a rugged but still properly British outdoorsman armed with machete and shotgun, played by Brian Blessed, as I mentioned. Leading the way for Professor Archimedes Porter, played by Nigel Hawthorne, a zoologist here to learn about rainforest wildlife, especially gorillas, and Porter's daughter Jane, played by Minnie Driver, who is, a girl. So John Clayton, here's a weird fact for you. In the novels, that's Tarzan's name. He's like a Viscount or something. Viscount John Clayton II, as he discovers once he first starts encountering fellow humans. They invented a villain and gave him the name that the hero had in the original story. I've seen weirder adaptational decision, but that one's impressive in its weirdness. The three humans find the first sign of gorillas they've been looking for, the previous night's nesting grounds. As Clayton and the professor continue tracking, Jane encounters a baby baboon and starts observing it, getting herself into a big confrontation with a whole pack of baboons, something she's ill-prepared for given the fine ball gown she's wearing in the jungle for some stupid reason. On impulse, Tarzan intervenes. That's called the Dulcinea effect, and Tarzan isn't the only Edgar Rice Burroughs character to be susceptible to it. I think John Carter suffered a case of it as well in his Disney adaptation. The name comes from Don Quixote, in which early on, the deeply insane protagonist spots some random woman and decides her name is Dulcinea and that it's his job as a knight to go on quests in her honor. The grand list of console role-playing game cliches describes it as a hero's willingness to fight to the death for any girl he met 3 seconds ago. Tarzan's case here is a rather forgivable one. He's been watching the situation play out for several minutes, and he does desperately want some information about these creatures who are like himself. The John Carter example is a bit more telling. Carter is among the Green Martians witnessing a battle taking place between two groups of Red Martians. He knows nothing of the situation, the Green Martians having told him nothing except that they are neutral due to having contempt for both sides in their self-destructive battle. But the moment that he notices that a single woman is taking part in the battle, he instantly jumps in and slaughters all of the woman's opponents. As the Grand List points out, it doesn't matter what she's accused of or how mysterious her origins. Heroes defend women. It's just what they do. It's fucking stupid, isn't it? So Tarzan takes Jane in hand and takes her on a very daring escape through the jungle. That is a lot of baboons who are remaining in a murderous mood for a strikingly long time. Jeez, I wondered how to turn the monkey-like Heartless in the Tarzan world in Kingdom Hearts into just regular baboons for Kingdom Butts. Man, oh man, was I off the mark. The baboons are slavering beasts in the film already. I'll just play that up. So once the baboons are out of the way, Tarzan closely inspects Jane, determining that she is indeed very much like himself. More so than he thought, as he notices that her dress and gloves aren't actually part of her. She talks to him without him understanding a word, and he says a single word to her in return, introducing himself as Tarzan. Which doesn't make a lot of sense, those syllables don't sound like part of the ape language. And after realizing he can only imitate words she's just spoken, she conveys to him that her name is Jane. Tarzan. Jane. Accurate to the Weissmuller version, he's stereotyped as saying me Tarzan, you Jane, but no, it was just the same as this. Tarzan, Jane. Turk, Tantor, and several of Turk's friends go looking for Tarzan, trying to figure out where he went, and they stumble upon the professor's currently vacant encampment, loaded with all sorts of equipment and, well, artificial things in general. They start messing with the stuff and get a good rhythm going, bringing us into the only song in the film performed entirely by characters in the film rather than by Phil, a lyricless number called simply Trash in the Camp. Do bop she do. Loved it as a kid. I remember seeing on the Disney Channel a featurette about Phil Collins recording the album version alongside NSYNC. Jane and Tarzan return to the camp, and Jane is intrigued by her rescuer's familiarity with the gorillas. Unfortunately, Kerchak also heard the musical number, and after intimidating Jane into submission, he makes the whole clan move out, Tarzan included, just as Clayton and the professor return to the trashed camp. Back at the colony, Kerchak orders the gorillas not to make contact with these new creatures. Tarzan is offended, especially when Kala tries to take Kerchak's side. He feels Kala must have had knowledge of the creatures who look like him and concealed it from him all this time. Jane tells her story, her rescue at the hands of Tarzan the Ape Man. Just as Clayton is beginning to doubt the fellow's existence, he shows up. The professor observes his ape-like movements, his attempt to mimic Clayton's upright stance. Clayton figures he can tell them where the gorillas are, but of course Tarzan doesn't speak English. Not yet. Enter Strangers Like Me. Probably my second favorite song in the film. You'll Be in My Heart was the Oscar winner. Two Worlds is the film's signature song for opening and closing the film. Me, I like Son of Man and Strangers Like Me. They're a shit ton less generic. They're actually about stuff. And I've always had a preference for big, fun songs over beautiful ones. If you've been binging the podcast, if such a person exists sometime in the future, you'll know that about me by now. So it's fun like Son of Man, and it's also a montage of Jane teaching Tarzan not only how to speak English, but pretty much all the learning material she has on hand about humanity and science, which is a lot. They brought a surprising wealth of information along on this gorilla study and expedition. As Tarzan has more and more secret rendezvous with the humans, especially getting closer and closer to Jane and showing her some of the beauties of the rainforest, he starts neglecting his family, much to the sadness of Turk and Kala. Clayton gets impatient and figures it's time to get Tarzan to show them the gorillas. Tarzan, in halting English, tells them he can't, offering no explanation but Kerchak. After the song, Tarzan is inspired by a slideshow he's seen of a romantic scene and picks a bouquet of flowers for Jane. He arrives at the camp to find a ship has arrived from London and the crew is helping pack up the camp, much to the disappointment of the three researchers, including Jane, who by this point has started wearing much more practical attire. It's very attractive. Jane invites Tarzan along to come back to London with her, and while he'd like to visit, he's uncomfortable when Jane tells him they'd be unlikely to ever return. He wants Jane to stay with Tarzan, and she's very overwhelmed by that idea. Clayton privately implies to Tarzan that Jane can stay if she meets the gorillas, and he's willing to do that for her. He asks Turk and Tantor to get Kerchak away from the colony for a while so he doesn't get in trouble for this. Turk is annoyed that he'd ask her for a favor after dropping the family so thoroughly, but one look at his puppy dog eyes and she submits. Turk dresses as Jane, while Tantor dresses his trunk up like Professor Porter, and they lure Kerchak out into the jungle while Tarzan leads Jane, the Professor, and Clayton into the nesting grounds, introducing them first to Kala, introducing her as his mother. Kala is frightened at first, but soon the whole family emerges, tentatively accepting them as Tarzan's guests. But disaster strikes when Kerchak returns and instantly attacks the humans. Tarzan protects them, wrestling Kerchak to the ground and holding him until the humans flee. Marked as a traitor, Tarzan flees himself. Kala tracks him down and decides to show him where she found him. The treehouse is decayed and overgrown, but Tarzan brushes the dust off of a photograph of himself and his parents. Kala says she wants him happy and will support him whichever path he chooses. She leaves him to think about it, and he emerges from the treehouse wearing his father's clothes, but telling her that she will always be his mother. The next morning, Turk and Tantor arrive at the beach too late to send off Tarzan as he rides the rowboat to the ship. Turk copes via masking her sorrow with rage. Once Tarzan boards the ship, the rather seedy crew captures the porters and tries to catch him. Hey, I know this shot. It's kind of a meme. It's Tarzan up the ship's mast, fully clothed. I think the meme I saw was this shot reinterpreted in a coloring book. And someone colored it in so that the suit was very gaudy and pink. And a speech balloon from below says, "We've got you this time, Weird Al." It was funny. Tarzan can't quite take full advantage of his agility on a smooth metal ship and while wearing shoes, so he's soon captured. And Clayton, I guess he kind of qualifies as a twist villain. I mean, he's been acting pretty sinister for a while, and yet here's a reveal over an hour in, so yeah, maybe, kind of. Clayton has put this all together because all along he's been here to capture and sell gorillas, not merely protect the professor as he studies them. Back in the jungle, Tantor finally snaps at Turk for how she's been keeping her emotions all bottled up and taking it all out on Tarzan. They hear Tarzan scream and rush to his rescue, swimming past Clayton and his men as they depart the ship and boarding it to rescue Tarzan and company. Epic escape. Tarzan swims back to shore. Clayton and his hunters arrive and start netting and caging gorillas. Tarzan swoops in, hollering his iconic bull-ape war cry and leading an army of jungle creatures. Most of the hunters are swiftly routed, leading to only very small and personal confrontations. Jane personally rescues Kala from some of the trappers. Clayton aims a shotgun blast at Tarzan, but Kerchak takes the bullet. Clayton then chases Tarzan into the trees, where we get just the most epic and precarious fight scene imaginable. Man, just all the choreography in this film, just the way it employs the treetops and, having to think in 3 dimensions, just top notch. Soon Tarzan gets a hold of Clayton's gun and puts the fear of death in him by pretending to shoot him. Enraged, Clayton goes after Tarzan with his machete, and they both get tangled in jungle vines. Tarzan gets himself loose, but Clayton, subjects himself to possibly the most gruesome death the Disney animated canon has ever done. He starts cutting all the vines he's tangled in, one by one, but neglecting the vine wrapped tightly around his neck. His neck snaps, and a lightning strike reveals the shadow of his limp, hanging body. Tarzan rushes to the side of the wounded Kerchak, who, in his dying breath, accepts Tarzan as his son for the first time, begging his forgiveness and granting him the title of clan leader. The gorillas look to him for guidance and follow him to a new shelter. Seems they don't have a permanent nesting ground. They're always on the move, and Kerchak is always saying, "We rest here tonight." So I guess they're an itinerant gorilla colony. I'm pretty sure that's true to life. The next day, Jane and the professor prepare to depart with the non-evil members of the crew. They say tearful goodbyes to Tarzan, but once they're halfway to the ship, Jane says fuck it and jumps back into the ocean, swimming to shore for her big damn kiss with Tarzan. Gotta say, it's hot. As I may have mentioned, Tarzan is among the sexiest of Disney men, and Jane, while surprisingly more cartoonish than most Disney women, considering the attention to realism in Tarzan's design, she's very attractive too. I like her face. The professor follows Jane ashore, bidding the captain to keep their secret by simply claiming their expedition was never found, and we celebrate to a reprise of Two Worlds, Jane swinging through the vines in a midriff-bearing outfit of, I guess, whatever material Tarzan's loincloth was made out of. Tarzan ends the film with his third and final oh. I'm sorry. Our directors are Chris Buck and Kevin Lima. Lima, of course, directed a Goofy movie before this, and Enchanted after this, while Buck would later on direct Frozen and Frozen 2. Short directorial careers, but prestigious ones. Buck also directed the Sony animated picture Surf's Up, right between Tarzan and Frozen. Tarzan and Frozen. Is that why that theory gained so much traction? Same director? I guess that makes a little bit of sense. So that was delightful. I mean, I gotta say, this has never been a contender for my favorite Renaissance film, not even close, but I mean, as films go, based on what I've just seen, this is probably the Renaissance's best. I mean, really, that was a dazzling end to the Renaissance, and a good sign of, well, the good things waiting for us in the experimental era, given the break from formula, you know? I was gripped. I'm shocked. The end credits version of You'll Be in My Heart here is apparently called the Phil version. I guess that's accurate. Here's another interesting thing. The soundtrack, each song has some producers, some arrangements, some orchestration, most of it by Phil Collins and Mark Mancina, but then looking at Son of Man, Phil Collins did that one all by himself. That's interesting. As I said, that happens to be my favorite song in the film. And then Two Worlds plays again over the credits. Well, that doesn't work. For one thing, it had a reprise just before the credits, so it's redundant here. For another, the lyrics and orchestration of Two Worlds are so perfectly synced to the action happening on screen that just listening to it while watching the credits roll is fucking weird. Poor choice. I'd have gone with Strangers Like Me, or, I don't know, what about the in-sync version of Trash in the Camp? I'd have liked to hear that in the film. Not Son of Man, it's my favorite, yes, but it's not thematic enough to play over the credits of the entire film, you know. Next, we're doing Mickey's Once Upon a Christmas. It's an anthology of Christmas stories starring the various Mickey Mouse franchise characters. I saw it, I think the Christmas before last, during, well, you know, the last time Natty came to visit me. That was when we did the Gargoyles retrospectives and went to the ski resort, and we were lucky we got that visit in when we did, because COVID hit the world 2 months later, and we haven't seen each other since. But I think she's in the vaccine group in Sweden now, so hopefully this year. Anyway, I had a good time with that film, and even though it ain't exactly seasonal right now, I'm all for seeing it again. Our narrator is Kelsey Grammer, not a guy I consider to have much warmth, but I guess it works. He tells us about Christmas. No, I'm sorry, I'm not going to do the Rhapsody Street Kids bit again. I'm sorry. I won't do it, I swear. Okay, oh, he's speaking in rhyme. How quaint. Kelsey Grammer. Okay. Okay, let's see. I believe there are 3 stories in this film. I think so, because the narrator says there are 3 gifts for us this evening. The first story is called Donald Duck Stuck on Christmas. Let's get into it. Despite the title, it stars Huey, Dewey, and Louie, played again by Russi Taylor, who live with their Uncle Donald, Tony Anselmo as ever. On Christmas morning, they dig into their presents, do some sledding, and have dinner with the family. Consisting of Alan Young's Uncle Scrooge, Tress MacNeille's Daisy, and one Aunt Gertie, also MacNeille, a character who's never appeared before this story and never again. The stereotypical chubby old relative who wants too many hugs and kisses. I think that relative will soon die out in fiction land because people in real life are realizing, no, a child doesn't have to hug and kiss their relatives if they don't want to. That's messed up. Russi Taylor's doing something here that she doesn't normally do, and that's using 3 different voices for Huey, Dewey, and Louie. Based on this shot, Dewey's voice being very high, Louie's lower, and Huey's right in the middle while also being raspy. I like that. There are very few stories that treat the 3 nephews as 3 different characters. DuckTales 2017 possibly being the first time each one has been a distinct individual. Before that, the 1996 series Quack Pack at least gave them 3 different voice actors and fashion senses. I don't remember if it distinguished them in any other way. It wasn't a very well-received show. Tried too hard to be 90s, to be very MTV. Big failure. But, yeah. They don't, they are treated as a single character in this story, but at least they have 3 different voices. The trio overall are a bit callous toward Christmas, digging into their presents early, not reading the card that came with the new sleds, eating food like pigs, and playing with their presents instead of joining the family in carols. You know, people have been making fun of Donald for years for being a terrible singer, but just now, singing We Wish You a Merry Christmas, I thought he carried it well. I think at some point Tony Anselmo just got older and couldn't carry a tune while doing the Donald voice. It's a miracle he ever could, frankly, but yeah. His singing is considered the low point in, say, the Little Mermaid world in Kingdom Hearts 2, already considered a low point of that entire game, and in a Three Caballeros themed episode of DuckTales 2017, the fact that Donald is a terrible singer was a plot point once. I remember Clarence Nash could sing pretty well as Donald. There's that whole scene in The Reluctant Dragon where he sings opera as Donald. I don't know if he ran into problems with that later in life, but, Tony Anselmo could sing in the role until he couldn't. I don't blame him in the slightest. You cannot blame a guy for losing that ability to age. Mad props for holding it as long as he did. For myself, I know the trick to the Donald voice, but I can't even speak intelligibly while doing it. You put a little air pocket in your cheek, see? But how to talk while doing that? How to even use your voice? I don't rightly know. At 9 o'clock, the triplets are sent to bed, sad that Christmas is over. Seeing a shooting star, they wish it was Christmas every day. And the next day, they find it's perfectly true. They're in a Bill Murray-style time loop, ladies and gentlemen, one that only the three of them are aware of, as is tradition. Interestingly, their first impulse is to be frightened at the awesome power they've commanded, but they get over it pretty quickly. What I said about their individual voices, scratch that. Rusi does use 3 different voices, but which one applies to which nephew has no consistency to it whatsoever. I was impressed for a second. Initially, they enjoy it, as they have the exact same day again and again, still paying no mind to the offense they're causing Donald. Soon enough, they get tired and bored and want the loop to end. Like Bill Murray, their first thought at that point is to take the nihilistic approach, making every day a disaster full of pranks and misbehavior since there'll be no lasting consequences. But that falls apart the first day they try it, when they realize this time that they haven't made Donald angry. They're used to that, that's kind of his whole thing. But that this time they've broken his heart. For the first time, they notice the card that Donald attached to the new sleds. They resolve to make tomorrow different, to make tomorrow the perfect Christmas. They make Donald breakfast. They wait to open the presents until the family arrives and willingly go to Aunt Gertie for Christmas kisses. They help Daisy set the table and they participate in the caroling. Donald is deeply suspicious, but they assure him all they're trying to do is create the perfect Christmas, topping it all off by making Donald a new sled of his own, one modeled after a boat. We all know how much Donald loves to sail. Which doesn't make much sense. Isn't his backstory that he was in the Navy and saw combat and has PTSD? You'd think sailing would be kind of triggering for him, or, on the other hand, maybe sailing and not fighting is his happy place. That's how it goes sometimes for veterans, they do miss the vehicles, if not the fighting in them. Next morning, Huey, Dewey, and Louie discover that it's December 26th, that their perfect Christmas was what they needed to do to break the curse. Just like Bill Murray. They go sledding with Donald and have a wonderful time. That story sucked. No, I'm totally kidding. I loved it. Groundhog Day-style time loops are for sure a plot element I'd love to include in a story. To really spend some time with the premise and dig deeper into all the implications would just be so awesome. Kelsey Grammer leads us into the second story, A Very Goofy Christmas. My favorite of the 3 stories, because when it comes to the 3 Disney boys, I'm a goofy man. Donald is the most popular worldwide, and Mickey is the company icon, but Goofy's something special, man. And his supporting cast like Max and Pete are excellent as well. They all make a good showing in this story. Goofy, played once again by Bill Farmer, is decking the halls like a maniac, and Max desperately wants to send his letter to Santa in the mail. Myself, I've always preferred the Jason Marsden-voiced teenage Max, but obviously that wouldn't work in a Yes, Virginia, There Is a Santa Claus story. I like Max's versatility, as I've said previously, and here, he's a kid played by child actor Sean Fleming, best known for playing Kim Possible's 2 younger brothers. Marsden's teen Max does appear in this film's sequel, Twice Upon a Christmas, in a story in which he has a girlfriend who is not Roxanne, but is voiced by Roxanne's voice actress Kelly Martin, even though before that, in House of Mouse, he was shown to be dating Roxanne, who was voiced by Grey DeLisle. Inconsistent Max's love life, but anyway, I won't be watching Twice Upon a Christmas in my collection. I hear it's inferior, and I know from looking at it that it's a very unappealing CGI art style, so I felt it was worth skipping. So anyway, Max and Goofy go to impressive lengths to make sure they get Max's letter to Santa to the post office in time. It's a massive action sequence that takes up quite a bit of time. It's a pretty good action scene, honestly, and I like the mall setting for inspiration, but, other than that, no, nothing worth writing home about. Max is eager to receive the shockingly specific snowboard he wants. While they're shoveling the driveway, their neighbor Pete, played as ever by Jim Cummings, mocks Goofy for his apparently sincere belief in Santa Claus. Max is shocked at the notion of not believing Santa exists, but Pete points out the illogic in the whole fantastical story. What a prick. Goofy tries to encourage Max's continued belief, but Max starts contemplating it. The size of the planet, how many children are in the world, what a reindeer really is. They're a real thing, by the way. They're caribou. Reindeer is the word used more in Europe, while caribou in North America, except when talking about Santa Claus, for whatever reason. Two words do very much refer to the same animal. It's the big deer that lives in northern polar regions on both continents, and presumably Russia as well. It's kind of everything near the pole there. That evening, Goofy brings Max along on a trip to help the less fortunate in this loving season. A shabby family with a barren old tree and a boy a bit younger than Max whose big Christmas wish is to have 3 toy cars instead of just 2. Goofy makes this family a big Christmas dinner and they're very touched. I like it. Little reminder in this Santa Claus story of what Christmas is really about. Not Jesus, but the other thing it's really about. Goofy dresses up as Santa, and all the kids are very happy to see Santa, especially Max. But Goofy is promptly unmasked, and Max is deeply upset at the trick. Later, at home, Goofy tries to make it up to Max, tries to get the Christmas spirit back in him, including whipping out Max's old stuffed bear, who is named Old Stuffed Bear. I don't know how I know Old Stuffed Bear exists. I'm pretty sure he makes an appearance in an extremely goofy movie, with Max rejecting the idea of bringing him to college. But I think I got the reference the first time I saw that, too. Perhaps he's been featured in episodes of Goof Troop that I've otherwise forgotten. Let's see if Old Stuffed Bear has an entry on the Disney Wiki. He does not. His only mention on the Wiki is in Max's article on a list of things he likes. Peculiar. Well, in searching for references to Old Stuffed Bear, I did learn that Twice Upon a Christmas is not the very last time Max was ever seen. There's an episode of DuckTales 2017 which features a number of 90s references, including Goofy coming by and showing off some photographs of not only Max, but also Roxanne and PJ. That show sounds like it's really good. I'll be taking a look at it one of these days. When Max's refusal ends up ripping Old Stuffed Bear rather badly, that brings up memories. Did that also happen in Extremely Goofy Movie? I feel like the bear wasn't that big a deal. Maybe I'm thinking of a Goof Troop episode again. I'm so confused. Anyway, with the bear sundered in two, Goofy vows to prove Santa exists. On Christmas Eve, they sit up on the roof, waiting for him to arrive so they can snap a photo, proving it forever. Night of no sign, Goofy's standard walking disaster area antics, and Pete's taunting does not improve Max's mood as they wait all night. Max goes to bed about around midnight and checks in around 3 o'clock to see Goofy still watching and waiting. The sack-bearing figure on a nearby rooftop turns out to be a burglar. Goofy sinks into a gloomy depression himself as Max brings him inside. Max tries to cheer Goofy up by dressing as Santa himself, coming down the chimney, then back up again. Goofy follows him up there, and as they embrace on the roof, both full of Christmas cheer, Santa Claus himself passes overhead, and the snowboard of Max's dreams floats down from the flying sleigh. Pete witnesses Santa's passage as well, and is dumbfounded. Max wonders why a gift didn't come for Goofy, and Goofy explains that the only thing he asks for every Christmas is for his boy to have every happiness. And so it is done. Kelsey Grammer tells us that the magic of Christmas is in giving, not receiving. I think they had pretty good setup for that moral, but I didn't really dwell on it enough, maybe. Could have done more to emphasize, Max basking in the happiness of the poor neighbors Goofy was helping. That was a good scene, though. The final story is Mickey and Minnie's Gift of the Magi. I've never read the original story, Gift of the Magi, but I've seen a few recreations, including this one, and they're always so wholesome and heartwarming. The story, by a fellow called O. Henry, was originally published in 1905. It's a short story about a poor woman at Christmas time. Wanting to get a good Christmas gift for her husband, she decides to have her long flowing hair cut off and sold so she can have the money to buy her husband a chain for his pocket watch. He comes home and is shocked. The gift he bought for his wife was a pair of decorative combs to wear in that long, beautiful hair of hers, and he sold his pocket watch to get it for her. The duo are a bit saddened that the gifts they got for each other are of no use, but mostly they're amazed at the other's sacrificial love. The title is because the author compares this gift to those that were brought to the baby Jesus by the three wise guys, but I don't see the comparison. But it's a grandiose title for sure. So, now that I've given away the plot, let's see how this Mickey and Minnie version slices it. First thing I noticed, while Jim Cummings did most of the incidental background voices in the Goofy story, Jeff Bennett joins him in that task here. I guess these were 3 separate productions, you know? Mickey, played by Wayne Allwine, and Minnie, played by Russi Taylor, are both strapped for cash, but have big plans for Christmas together. Simple ones. Minnie wants a case that'll hold Mickey's prized harmonica, and Mickey wants a gold necklace to match Minnie's family heirloom pocket watch. Details of this universe, well, as in many, Pluto, arfed by Bill Farmer, is Mickey's pet dog, and this also includes an interesting choice I've seen in a number of shorts that Minnie's pet is Figaro from Pinocchio, here given kitty voice by Frank Welker. Judging by the Disney Wiki, this film is the first time that Figaro was depicted as Minnie's pet. That's amazing. I thought they had a history together going back farther than that. Nope, it began here. That's wild. See, what do they do for a living in this incarnation? Always an interesting thing to learn about characters such as these who can be used in any old situation. Well, it seems Mickey works a seasonal job at a Christmas tree lot run by Pete, similar to his used car salesman persona in Goof Troop. Indeed, Pete more closely resembles his classical self in this short, having been brown-furred and much less scruffy in the Goofy part. Mickey makes mad tips, but has to intervene when Pete tries to scam a poor family into buying a real big tree, claiming the big ones are all he has left. Mickey produces a more affordable one for them, and enraged, Pete kicks him out and deducts the price of the big tree he would have sold from Mickey's pay. Pete gets his comeuppance. An unattended cigar soon lights the big trees ablaze, but that's not much help to Mickey right now. Minnie, meanwhile, works at Mortimer's, a Macy's-style department store. Her co-worker Daisy is here voiced by Diane Michelle instead of the usual Tress MacNeille, and also has a slightly different character design, wearing blue instead of pink and having no pupils in her eyes. Yeah, like I said, this anthology was 3 different productions compiled into one after the fact. All the details are different from one to another. Although I think maybe Diane Michelle might have been considered more Diane Michelle might have been more Daisy's regular voice actress than Tress MacNeille was, even though Tress would take over the role pretty soon, by 2000, 2002. Minnie needs her Christmas bonus to pay the bills, to say nothing about her gift for Mickey, but that's not what she gets when she's called into Mortimer's office. Mortimer Mouse is a tall and lanky rat who first appeared in the 1936 short cartoon Mickey's Rival, and this might well be his first appearance since then. Mortimer is best known for his House of Mouse incarnation, debuting a couple years after this one, where he's a total sleazeball played by Maurice LaMarche. Here he's elegant and refined and mustachioed, though still fairly sleazy, and is voiced by Jeff Bennett. Anyway, all Minnie's given as a bonus is a fruitcake. They're on a time limit now. The jewelry store Mickey wants to visit closes at 5. Meanwhile, the fire department are putting on a charity toy drive, but their band, the Firehouse 5, are currently working on the situation at Pete's. That is a brilliant reference. The Firehouse 5 plus 2 were a 7-piece jazz band made up of Disney animators, founded by Ward Kimball in 1949 when he found that 6 of his fellow animators, including fellow Nine Old Men legend Frank Thomas, were jazz enthusiasts. Kimball played the trombone and Thomas the piano. Walt Disney allowed them to form this professional musical group on the condition that they keep being animators as their day jobs, fair enough. The firehouse motif was because Kimball owned a restored fire truck from 1916. Well, that's certainly a hobby. Mickey jamming out on his harmonica attracts the attention of the fire chief, who begs him to perform to attract more people to the drive for the children's sake. He does so. Gotta admit, this whole thing of playing Christmas carols on a harmonica is actually pretty awesome. Neither of those things are usually very pleasant, but Mickey makes them work together. He keeps the crowd entertained until the Firehouse 5 show up and even joins them for their first number. Mickey races to the jewelry shop, but only makes it just as the shopkeeper is locking up. The shopkeeper doesn't initially think the harmonica is worth the necklace, but changes his tune after hearing Mickey mournfully play O Little Town of Bethlehem on it. So they open the gifts, the harmonica case, the watch chain. Minnie admits that she too traded away her watch to get the case. They embrace, and Pluto and Figaro snuggle up together to sleep. Oh, that's cute. Kelsey Grammer plays us out, and then the cast of all three stories get together for some carol singing, ice skating, and riding a Pluto-drawn sleigh. Ah, it's a medley. Each group sings the carol that featured in their story. We Wish You a Merry Christmas featured heavily in the Donald story, Deck the Halls in the Goofy story, and Jingle Bells in the Mickey and Minnie story. That's clever. I didn't notice while it was happening, but here at the end, when they bring them all together, I like it. I like it a lot. I don't like carols, as I said, but I like how the moment came together. We end on, not exactly a 90s pop ballad. It's a little more R&B than that, surprisingly. It's a mashup of those same three carols. Well, good. Tarzan didn't have a 90s pop ballad either. Didn't need one. Just went with reprisals of the Phil Collins versions, but what exactly am I listening to in that case? Why do end credits always leave the music for the very end? It always used to be the cast, and the music was the last part. Now they've moved up the cast to much earlier, presumably because that's the part people really want to know, but they want to know music too, dang it. Put music near the beginning too. Here we go, music. That mashup was done by Shadazy. Never heard of them, but I don't know, sounded cool. Elsewhere, I'm seeing that the Donald segment was done by Disney's Japanese studio, while the Goofy and Mickey ones by the Canadian studio. Neat. While the interstitial part was done nowhere in particular, I guess. I'm seeing a ton of ethnic names I can't place. Most appear to be Spanish, but quite a few are, I think, South Asian? I don't know. Well, it was certainly done somewhere. Okay, Droon segment. Today I'm just doing my usual recap of the desired guest stars for the new characters of the season. Considering Season 6 was the final 4 books of the series, we do have quite a few new major characters introduced, so let's talk about that, and that'll be the whole segment. Droon Season 6 recap. We have James Hong as Slyvor, Gary Anthony Williams as Grunto, Kate Higgins as Empress Mashta, Lorraine Newman as Hagdi and Twiggy as Magdi, Cheech Marin as Anga and Carlos Alazraki as Pinch, John Kassir as Nock, Will Wheaton as Ing, Barkhad Abdi as the Dog-Eared Thief and Billy Burke as the Mustache Thief, Robert Downey Jr. as Zabalak, Emma Watson as Weef, and William Shatner as Urich. And, okay, that's the whole segment. Yeesh, that feels weird. Segment over, just like that. Okay, let's do fanfiction then. And in the fanfiction segment, we're in the third quarter of More Than Survival, part 4 of 6 of my Maximum Ride fanfic. The very Mary Sue-ish Irish flock were just introduced, but hey, even if they were introduced in a very Mary Sue-ish manner, I think it all worked out. From what I can recall, they gave a much-needed shake-up to the cast without at all hijacking the story from the canon characters, who remained very much in the spotlight. I guess, let's see if I'm right about that. Chapter 22, well, interestingly enough, this one starts with Imogen's flock nowhere in sight. Max's flock are placed before a military type, one Amadeus Southbound, a character I never really got a handle on. His Iris incarnation has gone through a whole lot of different names, identities, and story roles. He's a big, bald-headed South African guy, and it's basically a cheap rehash of some scene in the Maximum Ride books, I want to say the 5th one, in which the flock are placed into military fatigues and don't take the training thing seriously, and don't get yelled at for it for some reason. Little joke about how military intelligence is an oxymoron, and Max swiftly gets bored and just flies away from the combat training. She knows how combat is done, pretty much, and here's where they're interrupted by Imogen, who is annoyed that Max would reject learning something new. The blokes in white jackets who created and brought up Imogen mentored her, told her she was destined for greatness. Quite to Max's consternation, as quite famously her white coats kept her in a crate and tortured her. All the greatness came from being bailed out by Jeb. And then the running. She alludes to the first Max trilogy, the constant running away, the constant fugitive status in quite intense terms. Imogen is, rather shocked. She's lived a life of books and discipline, being a soldier, and is disturbed that Max's experience was so different. I was about to say it wasn't very Mary Sue-ish of Imogen to understand Max's point, but at this point Sean chides Max for making Imogen feel insecure, and Max seeks to apologize to avoid making an enemy of her. That's pretty Mary Sue-ish. I thought I had it for a second. How this is resolved, Tui admits that unlike the flock, she can't really fight worth much, so Imogen teaches her personally. Max decides to shake things up and entrust Tui to Imogen's care. The flock observes that Sean is very sincerely emotional, not like someone who's brainwashed, while the twins, they're unreadable for now. Overanalyzing their character and relationships, that feels a little Mary Sue. I mean, most Mary Sues aren't introduced more than halfway through a fanfic, there's that, and again, they don't hijack the story from the real protagonists here, so I'm just insecurely noting what Mary Sue traits they do and do not have. Don't mind me, I will be doing this for a while, I think. Chapter 23, It's a Nice Evening Under the Stars. It's observed there are no structures whatsoever in this CSM base. There's a fun sparring match going on with Iggy, Nudge, and Gazzy, all three trying to take down the other two. That's fun. Fang and Max wonder what will become of Aerie. Aerie wants to kick some ass. Not in so many words, but she thinks fighting is important. And she wants to see Keegan, who of course instantly appears. Max figures they turned out okay for a couple of mutant lab subject girls. Max wants Keegan to check up on Angel. I'm so sorry. I had completely forgotten about this gag. Oh, this is a classic. Okay. The lead-in is dramatic. Keegan seems to glitch as she reports, with a lack of confidence, that Angel is safe and happy. To prove that her powers are still on the level, Keegan offers Max a freebie. Rather than world peace or anything of the sort, Max asks for Michigan J. Frog. Hello, my baby, hello, my honey, hello, my ragtime gal, send me a kiss by wire. Baby, my heart's on fire. If you refuse me, honey, you'll lose me, then you'll be left alone. Oh, baby, telephone and tell me I'm your own. Most people who know me know that I love Michigan J. Frog. I relate. I, too, am bright and vibrant in front of some people and just dull with others. My discomfort with strangers is very apparent, that once you're not a stranger anymore, I'm a wonderful person, but, the first time you meet me, I'm pretty much just a frog. Even in the story, Michigan stops singing and goes into normal frog mode as soon as Tui and Imogen arrive, making Max and Keegan crack up. Tui marvels about Imogen, who has much more discipline and control than Max does. Tui doesn't find this superior, just different, though she gets unreasonably offended when Max starts making fun of Imogen a little, and admits privately that over the course of a single day she feels she's fallen completely in love with Imogen. Man, lots happening, long chapter descriptions. It's been 5 minutes, I'm only 2 chapters in. Well, this was a turning point in the story, meant to shake things up, as things should be a lot more eventful, I suppose. Chapter 24, Angel POV. She informs us that, contrary to Keegan's claims, she is not safe and happy. She's imprisoned somewhere and is escorted by a simple robot that vaguely resembles Jewel, and some guards who appear to be something slightly more than human. She's bound and gagged, but she has powers she's never tried yet. She targets one of the guards at random and makes his head explode. But before Angel can start escaping in the chaos, Kelly returns, kills the remaining guards with her fingernails just for the heck of it, and continues to drag Angel along. It's explained that Kelly's thoughts are so rapid that Angel can't quite get a read on them, which is the real reason she didn't stop Kelly from killing Total. She simply couldn't see it coming in Kelly's thoughts. Retcon? Probably realized I made Angel too callous there. And, I just had her, still even not wanting to admit the fault was her own, she went way too far in the other direction. Kelly brings Angel to Janssen, thus the flock reunites with their forgettable nemesis from Book 3 for the first time. Janssen wants Angel to join the survivors as part of an order of members of the team who have psychic powers like Angel's own and have come to call themselves the Veniyan. Stated in universe to be a reference to Bone, a favorite comic book of mine I've mentioned a few times on the podcast. I don't know if I always planned on there to be a Bone reference in universe, but yes, from the beginning, Headmaster's appearance comes from the hooded one from Bone, and their name from the various Veniyan leaders in Bone, who are called Headmasters. But yeah, that's made to be an in-universe reference, and Angel retorts, maybe you know what this is a reference to. Vulcan Nerve Pinch. And she nerve pinches Janssen, noting in her narration that that move only really works when you're a Vulcan, and she actually knocked her out psychically. With Janssen out, Angel has to figure out how to get her way around Kelly. Trying to read her thoughts as words isn't going to work out, and, well, she figures it out instantaneously to just try to trust her instincts and take in the pictures, which are Kelly's thoughts. That could be something I could have dwelled on more, but I'm not sure how. Kelly is so fast that any experimentation on how to fight her would probs get you killed. Angel realizes that, unholy assassin or not, Kelly very much has the mind of a child, so simply seeks to escape her, rather than do any harm. Angel departs the Survivor's Tower and discovers what the rest of the cast already have, that the tower teleports to a new location in the world every few seconds. Angel sees it going from a snowy tundra to a pine forest. She tries to escape the tower, hope to get far enough away that she's not teleported with it, but there's a force field around it, and Angel falls to the ground and is recaptured by Kelly. Chapter 25. Back in Ireland, Tui is jabbering about her newfound attraction to Imogen, and Fang stops her from up and confessing it to her. Fang recalls a girl named Lissa, the famous red-haired wonder from the second Maximum Ride book, seen very briefly kissing Fang in the hallways of a school and igniting Max's jealousy. Nothing of that story from Fang's perspective is ever revealed in canon, so I engage in some speculation now, by having Fang discuss it for the very first time, claiming that Lissa was far too forward with him and was frightening to him, the kiss Max witnessed happening not necessarily with his consent. Tui is confused at the notion of someone being frightened by someone else having feelings for them, but trusts Fang's judgment, and expresses appreciation that they think nothing of the fact she's attracted to a girl. Iggy and Nudge discuss getting married here in Ireland on a night just like tonight, but oh, the drama! Nudge keeps thinking she spotted her ex-boyfriend Aaron among the crowds, despite having thought he had been slaughtered by Jewel along with the rest of their school back in the first book of the fanfic. She doesn't spot him. As the flock go to bed, Fang recalls something they haven't done in a while. That is to say, something they haven't done since the fanfic started, though, I get the vibe maybe they hadn't done it canonically in a while either. Early books featured a goodnight ritual, all 6 flock members putting their fists together and tapping them with their other hand. Just a meaningless show of solidarity that started during the 2 years they lived alone before the book series started. So they do that and comment that another thing they haven't done recently is give themselves atrocious, overly complicated aliases, and I come up with a few here myself. That was kind of fun. I think I captured the spirit of that running gag from the books. As they go to bed, Max and Fang wonder if the CSM have put together a good enough army to take on the survivors. But they can't be sure yet, as they don't know what the survivors have apart from their recent recruitment of Jewel, who is pretty much dangerous enough by himself. Chapter 26, we open on Max having a dream of a beautiful canyon she'd love to fly through, but then she's addressed by the voice. Only it's not the voice, it's Headmaster, who, again is ripping off the hooded one from Bone. The hooded one did stuff like that too, messing with people's dreams. Headmaster claims that if Max touches them, the voice will return to her. She's tempted, but Angel also appears in the dream, convincing her to stop. That the voice was nothing but a drug, and Max's longing for it back is nothing but withdrawal. Angel begs Max to trust her one last time before the connection is severed. Max agrees and asks Angel in return to stay alive. Max refuses to touch Headmaster and awakens. Oh, this is a bitchin' line. Oh, I gotta remember this. Max says to Fang that 2 people were just battling for control over her mind. Fang asks who won, and Max says, I did, of course. You think somebody else was going to? That's awesome. I love notions like that, where you think there's a dichotomy, but there's a third choice. Similar line of thought being, I was in a knife fight. The knife lost. Max realizes this dream was very much real when Fang accurately describes Headmaster to her. That's right, Max had never seen Headmaster before, but everyone else had. Thanks to Angel, she has snapped out of her dependence on the voice. Max describes 9 days passing before Angel visits her dreams again. Max forgives Angel and wants her to return, but Angel can't. Max knows the tower travels, so she promises to find it somehow. Angel is non-committal about Max coming to save her, and Max awakens to find Imogen standing over her, hoping they can fly together. We haven't actually seen much of Imogen yet. That's not very much a Mary Sue trait. I'm sorry, I'm not really keeping score or anything, just observing how well I did at this whole introducing new characters halfway through a story thing. That's something I could do in non-fanfic stories too, you know? Something that's sometimes not well received, something you gotta do really right, lest you end up with a Cousin Oliver or a Scrappy Doo or something. Chapter 27, Imogen and Max chit-chat about Tui's development, and that turns to the ethics of their own existence. Imogen thinks it's a gift to fulfill her purpose, but Max points out they wouldn't need to fulfill a purpose if they could have been born as normal people. Max asks Imogen a bit about the CSM, what she knows, what she doesn't. Imogen confirms that Aaron is among them. For a bit of bonding between the flocks, Imogen challenges Max to a game she likes to play with her team, a game of fighting in midair. First to touch the ground loses. They part ways to prepare for such a thing. Chapter 28, we switch to Fang's POV to watch the fight. I like how I did interesting stuff like that at certain points in this saga and the one before it, telling the story from the perspective of someone not necessarily central to it. That's a cool idea in theory, and I don't think I ever did it badly. The fight begins, and, I distinctly recall I took the concept of it from an episode of The Legend of Tarzan, the animated series based on Disney's 1999 Tarzan film. It's quite a coincidence I covered at the beginning of this episode. As you probably know from the Disney segments of the podcast, I'm just about finished watching the Little Mermaid TV series, and after that I'm going to watch the Hercules TV series. But the Aladdin series never came to Disney Plus, and nobody seems to even remember the Tarzan TV series. I'm not sure what I'm going to do about retrospectives after that. Anyway, that was a similar challenge in one episode of Tarzan, except they were trying to stay in a big tree, but it was the same overall premise, that they fight and the first one to touch the ground loses. Imogen sets some stakes. The basic week of servitude, the loser's flock waiting hand and foot on the winners. Imogen warns that her first command will be for Max to quit calling her Immy. Ooh, now those are high stakes. Sean calls out for Imogen to beat them soundly, clearly looking down on Max's flock as roguish and unrefined. Fang knows that Max will lose patience first, just the way it goes, but this won't necessarily be a disadvantage. Surely, Max is that good at what she does. The twins, Jax and Fallon, speak for the first time, revealing themselves to have Cockney English accents rather than the Irish of Imogen and Sean, and they declare that they're bored and drag Gazzy away, implicitly because, well, he's a boy in their age bracket, so they're interested by default. The fight is, not badly choreographed. Move, counter move. I might look over the choreography again here in Chapter 28. I think, it's a well-paced fight scene. Max wins, ultimately, but Imogen is furious at the dirty tactics that were used. Max, in turn, is borderline offended at the notion of fighting with honor. That's not how one survives. And so it's clear Imogen has never been in a real fight in her entire life, and she storms off in outrage. Sean is smug at this public revelation of Max's barbarism, and feels even more validated when Fang beats him the fuck up for his continuous bad-mouthing of Max. Fang storms off in a rage as well, while Max and Tui search for Imogen. As far as the Mary Sue count, I like what I'm doing here. The OCs are moralizing at the canon characters, believing themselves to be superior, but it's clearly presented as the OCs being impossibly naive. If you're not paying close attention, this comes off as a pretty standard Mary Sue moment, but it's clearly anything but. Good going, young me. Chapter 29, Tui finds Imogen a bit before Max does, and from Max's perspective, we see Tui singing Imogen a comforting little song, and as Max backs off so she can't actually hear what they're saying, Tui clearly confesses her feelings for Imogen. They kiss. At that, Max descends on them, and Tui departs to leave them to it. Imogen tells Max not to apologize, because mostly she's mad at herself for her naive freakout. She quotes something people have been saying to her for ages, something nearly word for word that Jeb told Max in one of the earlier Maximum Ride books. That she, Imogen, is the most important person ever to exist, that she will save the world. Imogen feels worthless in this moment, realizing that Max has lived actual pain while she is not. Max, in turn, envies Imogen the luxury. She sees that the white-coated scientists have attempted 2 different ways to put together a mutant girl who will save the world. making one tough with trauma while the other is actually trained. Max figures Imogen's way actually works, but that's fascinating. I think I'll bring this notion up to Mason. That's Mason Ellison, creator of Better Yet. If you're not up on TAPAS lore whilst listening to Podcast 51, I honestly have no idea who listens to the podcast or will in the future. But he's got a chosen one narrative of his own that might benefit from this notion. So Max and Imogen make amends. As Max starts to take a leisurely walk back to her campsite, she senses the presence of Jeb, but doesn't give him the dignity of actually looking at him. He doesn't speak, but the conversation with Imogen just now has made Max bitter about her destiny to save the world, most of which she's heard about from Jeb, after all, remarking that of course she's going to pass all his tests because that's what destiny means. The goodwill Jeb built up from bravely fighting Jewel has, it seems, faded, and Max snubs him. Chapter 30, Gazzy POV. Again, right? Yeah, there was one before this, shortly after the first Angel POV, but if I recall, there wasn't much need for it to be Gazzy. This time it is necessary because he's alone now with the creepy English twins, Jax and Fallon. To his surprise, they lead him to a little village for afternoon tea, something they apparently do on the regular. They are known in this little village, despite their, mutant bird status. They talk about, twin stuff, like they establish that they're natural twins, not clones like Max and Tui. That right now Fallon is wearing blue shoes and Jax is wearing pink shoes, but that's the only way to tell them apart right now, and sometimes it just can't be done. They ask him what Gazzy is short for, and for the first time in his life, faced by two pretty girls, he doesn't want to admit that he named himself the Gas Man years ago. He tells them regardless, and they don't press the issue, instead explaining that unlike Imogen and Sean, they were raised in lab captivity like Max's flock, and joined Imogen's flock only recently. Gazzy spends a whole day with the twins, and as the sun goes down, they start kissing him, figuring it's an important life skill all three of them ought to learn. Well, I think this subplot gets creepy, very creepy later, but in my opinion it's not there yet. I think that's a fairly normal notion for a trio of traumatized 12-year-olds to have and to try. Maybe making it twin girls and one guy was a bit fetishistic, but not inherently so. No, I don't think I'd change anything if I were to replicate this scene in another story. I don't know if it would happen in Iris. All the characters in Iris are older than 12, but I'm sure there are tons of Iris characters I haven't invented yet, and that some of them might even appear at the beginning of the story. Chapter 31, Iggy POV. He's snuggling Nudge and... Sorry, I was... Syntax is important. I read that as, he's snuggling Nudge and Fang. No, that's not what he does. He's snuggling Nudge, and Fang is with them. That's the syntax of that sentence. Fang wryly remarks that the few short minutes Max has been away has aggravated his abandonment issues already. Max and Tui return. Max is pleased to report that Imogen is on board with learning the ropes from them now. Tui, however, admits that despite her infatuation, kissing Imogen has made her realize she's not actually attracted to girls. That's the first time, but not the last. I did that with a fanfic, having characters realize they're gay and then shortly realize that they're actually not. That's... what the hell, me? I know what the hell. When I was going through puberty, I thought I was bisexual, but then I realized, no. I was just going through puberty and turned on by everything. I only actually want to have sex with women. I made an assumption that this is a common experience, and maybe it is, but I don't think it's a cool idea to explore. I think, in a world so hungry for LGBT representation, maybe in the future, but for now, I don't think the world needs a legitimate it's okay to be straight story. So anyway, Tui, who incidentally does not yet go by Tui in the narrative. I'm curious about when that happens. Obviously, it's a big deal when a character changes their name. I think maybe Imogen is responsible for the nickname. That would certainly make sense with how things are going. Anyway, Tui, who, is called Max in Max narrated chapters and Max 2 by everyone else. 2, he has to figure out how to go back on everything that just happened with Imogen, you know, to break up 5 minutes after getting together because she's realized she's not into girls. I mean, that sort of thing happens all the time to gay people, right? That you enter a relationship and then have to break it off because you realize you're not straight and you have to hurt them, you know? It makes sense. It probably does happen the other way around because aesthetic attraction is different from sexual attraction, but overall, that's not cool, the thing I did there. Meanwhile, Gazzy returns from spending time with the hot English chippies and starts talking about being more dignified and mature, starting with changing his name. The rest of the flock immediately figure out what's going on, that this is to impress a couple of hot girls, but he denies that and just insists he needs to grow up and be treated with some dignity. I wonder if anything like that happens in the final Maximum Ride book. Gazzy is only 9 at the end of the series, while he's 12 here, but I think there's an epilogue? I don't know how distant it is, though. Gazzy's overall persona is definitely that of someone under the age of 10, so I do think he'd change his name at some point. Lots going on in this chapter. Many things intersecting there, look at that. So Nudge asks Iggy for help tracking down Aaron. Iggy is obviously reluctant to search for Nudge's ex-boyfriend, reminding Nudge what a jerk he was, but Nudge reminds Iggy that they were only 11 years old at the time. He's probably matured, and it's just such an intriguing mystery that Aaron is alive that she's willing to take the chance to investigate it. So they find him. Aaron explains that when the school was destroyed, his mother had just gone into labor, and so he was there for the birth of his sibling. He's here because he believes in the cause, and he's been avoiding Nudge since she arrived because he figures it would bring back bad memories if they met again. The fact that Aaron's previously unknown surname was Lakelandy has come up a few times. I wonder where I got that idea. I feel like I took the name Lakeland and stuck the letter I at the end of it, but I don't know what would motivate such a decision. A Google search for Lakelandy comes up with nothing but a lot of things called Lakeland. Maybe it was a typo. Maybe I meant for his name to be Lakeland, accidentally hit the letter I at the end of it, and liked the result. I do that sometimes, you know. A lot of the best character names come from typos. Anyway, Aaron states that he never liked Nudge's offer to be just friends, so she can either date him or get out of his face and leave him alone. Offended, Nudge takes the latter option, but kicks his butt first. Later, Iggy is gathering some refreshments and lounges around inside the living cell, which works nicely as a place to shield him from all the sound going on in the crowded CSM headquarters. Kind of a sensory deprivation chamber, like Daredevil, you know? And a sensory deprivation chamber he can talk to. That's a very good idea. A good character detail about Iggy and a creative use of the very odd character that is the living cell. Their conversation is largely filler, but Nudge joins them. She's been angry at Aaron and angry at Iggy for having an I told you so attitude about being right about Aaron being a jerkwad, but she's cooled off. They start having sex inside the living cell, which they admit is weird, but figure, hey, it's a trusted friend. It can be their honeymoon suite later. Chapter 32, we return to our villains. Jewel addresses Lang and Shay, asking them for the record which side they're on. They reply they're on the side that keeps them alive, so Jewel puts blades to their throats to establish that they're on his side again. He leads them to his personal chambers, telling them he intends to have a word with Headmaster before he goes. No one ever speaks to Headmaster. Janssen speaks for him, and they're not sure if Headmaster even lives in the tower, but Jewel intends to get Headmaster's attention. He does so by summoning guards to his office, just a few at a time, and killing every single one that shows up. Eventually, Jewel reasons this will attract attention to himself and the notice of Headmaster. There's a really cool moment where Lao Hu notes that Shay and Lang have been recruited back to their side, and so must believe in their cause and have sympathy. And Shay's answer to every phrase in that statement is, evidently. I think that's cool. That's a nice representation of someone who's working under duress. So anyway, yeah, Jewel is done working for the survivors, and he's about ready to establish himself as king of the villains once more. So that was nice. That was an awesome segment of this story. I knew Imogen's team didn't completely hijack the plot, but didn't realize they did, well, so little hijacking. And gosh, so much happened and intersected there. This was a long fanfiction segment, just the kind of on par with the a couple of the Disney film segments. So that was fun. That was a highlight of this reading experience. I'm proud of me for this story. The dynamics are good. I had forgotten them. I can most certainly use them again. So conclusions, this still isn't going as fast as I would like. Already, things like the TAPAS Anniversary Special and promos for Better Yet have featured the Phase 2 TAPAS logo before it was officially unveiled, just because, I want them remembered with the high-quality logo. The new logo, I will be unveiling it properly, the moment the next podcast drops. The new logo, among other things. I definitely wanted to finish this podcast before bringing in my computer for repairs. I was going to do that last week, but I had to finish the podcast, which took me a week longer than I anticipated. It's just not possible to rush this thing. So that's going to happen next. They're ready for me. They've been ready. I filled out a form and everything. I've got some hardware problems to figure out, which I'm pretty nervous about, but got to get it done. My computer, I don't want it to get any worse. So I'm preparing to back up all my files and shit, and then I'm going to prepare for life without my laptop. That's going to represent a pretty major shift in lifestyle for me, so I have to be ready for it. Or maybe I don't. Maybe the repairs will only take like a day. We'll see. Either way, hopefully I get it back. The goal is to get Podcast 52 out before Better Yet, so it's not incongruous that Better Yet looks like a Phase 2 project, yeah? So it's that time now. Kind of a hiatus, maybe not a long one, but a transitional period. Better Yet is also on hiatus because our studio guy is taking a trip, so it'll be another couple of weeks before we can get back to editing it, hence why the release date in the Better Yet trailer was given as simply July. No day, just July. In other news, kitties. I have kitties now. Their names are Butter and Marmalade. They are teeny tiny kitties. They were feral out in my grandpa's neighborhood. Young enough that it's not too late to make them pets. Hey, Butter, say something. Say meow. Give me those squeaky meow. No? No meows? Can I make you purr? Can I hold you really close to the microphone and pet you? Will that make you purr? No, you're gonna squirm until I let you go? Okay, kitty. Butter's adjusted amazingly well. Just a regular cuddly, playful kitten now. You'd never know he was feral a week ago. How about you, Marmalade? What would you say if I tried to boop you in the nose? Yeah, that's what I thought. Okay. Marmalade's having trouble. Still doesn't trust me, but, I got two. They can be there for each other, and, it's just delightful. Do you see them socializing? It's some very good kitties. Tapas and Stuff Productions is brought to you by our supporters on Patreon, including Knight Sadie Allen.